welcome back everyone. In this tutorial, I'm going to cover doing text shadows, drop shadows on your text using CSS. It's version 3. And I want to show you how to do it and give you some suggestions. And we're going to start with our header. And the reason why we're going to start with the header is because the header is nice and big. And one of the guidelines on doing shadows is you might want to be careful to not do it like, if you're going to do it and it's going to become distracting, don't do it on like your paragraphs of text unless you can do it and enhance the readability. So we're going to focus, and I've zoomed in on this by the way. I'm going to focus on my header 1 and talk about applying it. So when you apply text shadow, first of all, I want to warn you that not all browsers support this. Most do now. If you have a new browser, the latest update, you should have this available. So we're going to do this. It's called text shadow. Okay? Text shadow. Now, you need to give it some values. When you have a drop shadow, your drop shadow could go to the right or the left. It could go up or down. Shadows will have an amount of blur, and they need to have a color. So you're going to want to give it a color. So we're going to set all those one by one. So the order in which you do text shadow is the first value is the X offset. So it's going to be X, it's going to be Y, it's going to be blur, and then it's going to be color. Okay? So I'm going to replace each of these terms with actual values. So X, if we give it a positive value, 2 pixels, and we give the Y a positive value. Okay, X, positive value is to the right, negative value is to the left. On the Y, it's always the second value. A positive one is down, a negative one is up. You might be thinking, wait a minute. I studied geometry. I did my algebra. I had a Cartesian grid, and if I give a positive number to my Y, I went up. Okay. Well, in this case, we don't because the upper left-hand corner is 0, 0. In other words, the top of your screen, Y is 0. The bottom, it's going to be the height of the screen. So as we increase our Y, we move down the screen on browsers. Okay. Next is the amount of blur. We're just going to give everything 2 pixels. And then for color, we're just going to give it black. Also, there is a shorthand for the color code. Anytime you have repeating values like FF or 00 or 33 or whatever, you can condense them into 1. And so on this, FFF is the same as 6 Fs. So let's save our changes and let's, wait, we don't have to run it, it's already open. So we go back to the page, hit refresh. Now, I gave it a value of white. I meant to give it black, so let's just do that. 000 is black. Hit refresh, and there is the shadow. Remember, the first value is the X or horizontal offset. The next one is the Y or vertical offset. Then it's blur. Let's play around with it. Let's move it to the left. So we give a negative value for our X. Save our changes. Hit refresh. Now the shadow's on the left. It looks like the light is coming from the above and to the right. Next, let's move it above. So we give it a negative 2 pixels. Save our changes. Go back. Now it's left and above. And of course, we give that a positive value. It will be right and above. Or you could even do this. You could give a value of 0, which doesn't change. It's, in this case, the horizontal position. And now it's just straight above. But because we have a blur, it sticks out on the sides a little bit. Okay? So just keep that in mind. All right? Let's go back and let's just go back. My typical favorite, and I don't know why, is always right and below. Now, let's do different text shadow blurs. Let's give it a value of 10 and really blur this sucker. 10 pixel blur. See how it just really is just kind of out there? All right. Color. All right, so that's a 10 pixel blur. Let's look at a 1 pixel blur. Much sharper, but there still is a bit of a fuzziness. And the last one I want to show you is no blur at all. Save your changes. Hit refresh. Now it's really sharp. If you're going to do that, I recommend you hardly move it at all. So let's try a 1, 1, 0. There. Okay, it's up to you how you want to do this. Okay. And then, of course, we can change the color, and that's pretty simple. So that's just the formula for doing this. And you can give a hexadecimal code. You can also, for example, use RGB or RGBA. So RGBA gives us a little transparency. So if we want black, 0, 0, 0, and then we could give it maybe a 50% opacity. Save your changes, hit refresh, and now it's a lighter gray, lighter black. Part of the background color is showing through. Of course, you might want to blur it a little bit more just so you can see it better. So let's blur it a little more. There you go. All right, so the last thing I want to mention is just some general tips and strategies. Number one, go easy on the shadows. Don't make it too obvious, and I don't recommend you make it call attention to itself too much. This is a nice subtle one, and let's see it at normal size. At normal size, you don't see a lot there. Another thing we can do is we can make our text pop out in our paragraphs by giving it just a 1 pixel offset and 0 blur. And we can actually highlight our text a little bit. So let's show you what that looks like. So I'm going to go down to my paragraph, and I'm going to go ahead and just do a text shadow. And we're going to put 1px, 1px, 0, and then let's just go ahead and give it, let's give it a white highlight. Save your changes, hit refresh. That one, I don't know. It might be good, it might not. You could change the direction of it. The other thing you might want to try, let's just go ahead and see this. Going to the left. So you can play around with that a little bit. I like giving it to the paragraph. By giving it to the paragraph, you're really trying to aim to get it to stand out a little bit more. They are both here, so I'll get that. All right. Sorry, my mumbling there was to a student. I'm done. All right, moving along. The other thing you might want to try is you might want to try the background color of the page and see how that works. Now you might say this doesn't do much because it's the same background color, but sometimes, depending on the browser and the colors, it can make it stand out a little bit more readable. Anyways, so just play around with that. By the way, the thing I was doing before, where I give the background color, or I give a shadow that's the same as the background color, like I said, it may not look like it helps, but I do want to show you this article that talks about it. It's from a site called UX. That stands for User Experience Boost. They have tips and tricks for more legible content. And one of the things they're talking about with new web fonts and new ways to implement them, a lot of people are using these embedded fonts off of Google and other sites like I had you guys do. And it says on here, common web fonts, it's not a big concern. However, with the newer custom web fonts, they don't always render on different devices. So one of the things they show is how the same fonts look different on different devices and browsers. So some thinks they should be more legible. Some thinks they want to show them the way they were intended to be displayed. So each one has different ways of doing it. Okay. And so, like on here, what they're suggesting is if you add a 1 pixel or greater text shadow, custom fonts will become much more legible on Chrome on Windows 7. And I've seen this happen before, where it looks good on one computer and it looks bad on another. And so by just adding that text shadow, it's the same shadow as the background color. It makes it just a little more readable on the browser that you're looking at, okay? And so they have it on here, text shadow. Now notice what they did. They had no offset. And then they did this 1 pixel transparent. Or on here, here's for you can apply a 0 pixel hard shadow. Notice they're all zeros with a color. And then they add this extra little transparent. So there's all kinds of interesting tricks for doing this. And so I recommend you take a look at some of those and figure it out. And there's many more. So this is the last set of different shadows. And this is from the W3C, and they give examples of text shadow. This is horrendous, and it looks really bad. Okay, I don't recommend it. Okay, that's not very readable. Fuzzy, now notice this one is a sharp shadow, and it's hard to read, but when they make it a little more fuzzy, it's a little bit easier. Here we have white text. There's no color contrast that works, but once we add a shadow, it creates more of a contrast. Here's one that used multiple shadows. Looks really ugly. Here's one I really like this, where we have well-placed dark and light shadows. This one looks like the text is sticking out. The one below it looks like it's carved in. You can do some really interesting effects with something like that. Okay. But notice it says here it's dangerous. If the browser doesn't support it, it will be unreadable, and then that's a problem. You can draw letters as just outlines. That's kind of an interesting one here. A cat, an apple, etc. If you do that, you should probably only do it on large headers. I wouldn't do it on standard text. Neon glow, not so much. But anyways, there's just some other ideas. Just go out on the web. There's all kinds of suggestions for how to use text shadow. I'll just leave you with the code. Good luck.